the Big Ten is going to take the plunge on private equity. It sure appears, according to reporting from ESPN. I mean, everybody, but ESPN had it first. And with it, the Big Ten is killing any thought of a super league. So those of us that wanted Project Rudy, multiple outside entities have tried to kick around and workshop the idea of how to make a super league work. This, by virtue of a 10-year extension on the grant of rights, going to kill that. And it's also going to open a can of worms of unequal revenue sharing. So you can look at this and celebrate it if you are a mid to lower tier Big Ten team. But this is also opening up the door to unequal revenue sharing. And there are a lot of details here that lead me to believe this is the first step toward that happening, not just with private equity money that would be coming in, but just any money. And I will get to that. All right. I'll leave that as a tease. I'm going to get to that here in the article because the way this starts to read, I'm looking at this like, all right, well, sounds great. We can all cheer this if we're Maryland, if we're Michigan State, if we're Minnesota. We can all cheer this right now. But where does this ultimately lead in terms of how we're going to be able to stack up against our peers in this conference? So I'm just going to start reading to you some from the article. The Big Ten is in discussions about a private capital deal. Now, this is interesting. Private equity was like the headline that was going around on Twitter, but private capital. So distinction there. It's not an outside entity that will have actual legit ownership and be able to make decisions and like have a board seat and all that. That's not what's going to happen here. It's a private capital infusion, but then you're on the hook for kicking them back some of your revenue every single year. This is very similar to, and yes, fair to say, Big 12 has explored this. Reporting has been out there about that. It's the same type of thing that we heard when the Big 12 was exploring some of this. The discussions include a 10-year extension of the league's grant of rights until 2046, which would ensure long-term stability in the Big Ten. A deal in the grant of rights extension would also be a distinct blow to the outside entities attempting to form super leagues around college sports. And again, it's just like, look, if people are going to be tied up with their media rights to the Big Ten for another 10 years, you're talking about 2046. That's obviously making it much more difficult to do anything with, pooling media rights, which that's been in the news, right? It's actually, you have a Republican bill that's out there about the future of college sports. That is the SCORE Act. You have the SAFE Act now that's been proposed by Democrats. And actually the SAFE Act is the one that syncs more with what Cody Campbell is trying to do, which is use the Sports Broadcasting Act, amend that to be able to pool everybody's media rights and make a bunch more money, which is interesting here because the Big Ten and the SEC have been against that. But the idea with this, as we're going to read here, is to be able to be more organized, to pool everybody together to make more money within the Big Ten. So, what you have here is all for me, not for thee. Big Ten wants to do it all for themselves, not make the entity as a whole better. And so they're going to get $2 billion in private equity. It sure sounds like here. Now, on that front, the article says a decision either way on the private capital deal is expected in the upcoming weeks. Nothing is considered imminent or certain. They're considering 3 different plans from 3 different places. The league has not taken a vote. Now, this is where I start to say, all right, let's hone in this discussion on teams that even if you're not in the Big Ten, but you're in the SEC, you're thinking, well, this will be a precedent-setting thing. Okay, so if you're Vanderbilt, if you're Northwestern, if you're Minnesota, Michigan State, Maryland, like these type of schools, you got to be looking at this like, all right, where's this going? Now, they're all supporting this, obviously, for right now, and it will give them more money total. I guess it'll give them a leg up on their peers in the Big 12 and the ACC. But I think eventually this puts them a lot further behind the top crust of the Big Ten. The setup being discussed, sources said, is that this will essentially be the formation of a new commercial entity within the Big Ten that would house all revenue generation, such as media rights, sponsorships, and league revenue streams. The working title for the new entity is Big Ten Enterprises, sources told ESPN. Big Ten Enterprises. Doesn't all this just sound exactly like why we all got into college sports and love college sports? Because it's great and it's zany and we have all these unique personalities. And now we get Big Ten Enterprises where we just house all of these different random revenue streams that we have. And we get to be suit and tie in the corporate world with Big Ten enterprises. Vomit, dude. The Big Ten will essentially have 20 equity shares comprising the 18 schools, the league, and this investor. Sources told ESPN the setup eliminates the need to give an outside investor a specific portion of control. They won't have board seats. And here's a quote on that. Quote, think of it this way. The conference is not selling a piece of the conference. Traditional conference functions would remain 100% with the conference office. The new entity being created would focus on business development, and it would include an outside investor with a small financial stake. All right, so you create Big Ten enterprises that will not control anything, but will handle the money. All right, well, you're saying, John, what is this going to do? What actually would this, like, tangibly? What does that mean? This seems great. What does it mean? Well, they get Nebraska's AD on the record in the story to talk about it. Well, actually, I think part of it's Nebraska's AD, part of it's an anonymous source. So here's an anonymous source that says, quote, we're underselling the strength of what we do, the way we are structured. This is a way to organize ourselves better. Okay. Then the Nebraska AD starts talking about if we're going to sell jersey patch advertising, right? Like a advertisement on the jersey. He's talking about, I could do it on my own. I'm going to make some money, but not a ton. But he says, I would really like to see if there's an opportunity for our conference to put all those jersey patch rights together. And all of a sudden, they're worth a whole lot more to the institutions when 18 are playing instead of just one. Guys, I'm not going to lie. I read that and I just wanted to beat my head against a wall because all I've heard from the Big Ten corners of the earth is, well, I'm skeptical that the Sports Broadcasting Act and pooling all these media rights together for all the conferences would actually make that much more money. We're against that. We're skeptical of that. Well, you're using the same concept here. Hey, instead of just us doing the jersey patches, what if we pool them all together so that we can all leech off Ohio State's jersey patch and make more money together? It's the same. It's the same thing. What's the Office meme? Like, corporate asks you to point out the difference between these two pictures. It's the same thing. Spider-Man meme. It's the same thing. And I also had to just laugh at, we're underselling the strength of what we do, the way we're structured. This is a way to organize ourselves better. I mean, is there no hint of irony in that? And just thinking about the sport as a whole right now, like, we're underselling the strength of what we do, the way we're structured. We need to organize better. Yeah, the sport needs to organize better, not plunge down a private capital hole here. I don't know, dude. You guys know where I stand on this. I hate it all. But the kicker here for all your mid-tier to lower-tier Big Ten and SEC schools is the amount of the payments that would be doled out is still being discussed, but the basic format, sources told ESPN, is believed to be tiered. All schools in the league are expected to receive at least a 9-figure amount up front. So it's a ton of money coming in up front. 9 figures. I mean, we're talking, there's a big deal made about Kansas getting the $300 million, right? Be like every school getting that sort of payment up front from the private equity, private capital infusion. But the final financial details are still being discussed as bigger brands are expected to receive more money. That's like buried at the very end of this story. It's unequal revenue sharing. You're going to have unequal revenue sharing. So, okay, we're talking about, I realize that here it is talking about specifically the money that's coming in from private equity being unequally shared. But all that money's going into we already learned all that money's going into the same pot, the same Big Ten enterprises pot. So your TV revenue, your whatever, jersey patch revenue, your private equity revenue, it's all going into one pot. And then they're going to distribute it, and they're already figuring out, well, hey, if we're getting a bunch of private equity money, it's not fair for Ohio State to get the same amount as Northwestern, so let's unequal. They've opened up the box, guys. They've opened it up. Mid to lower tier SEC and Big Ten schools, you're going to fall further behind. You will fall further behind those schools in your conference because they're going to start unequal revenue sharing. And at the same time, you've now signed your rights away until 2046, which there's really no choice on that. I get that. I understand. But this is just, a lot of us have said, hey, this is coming. It's really fun to be, I guess, right now to be a lower tier Big Ten or SEC school and point at everybody and call them in the Big 12 and ACC and call them poor and make fun of them while you go take your beating every single year and have a miserable time actually playing football and watching the games and all of those things. But I mean, the fun's going to start to run out a little bit when Ohio State's making 10 times as much as you, and all this stuff is just being put in a giant pot and unequally distributed based on brand. So I don't know. I mean, we'll see where this goes. I know it says nothing's imminent, but the story doesn't get written if people don't think this is actually going to happen. I guess the other thing I should say is, I mean, I thought once the stories are being written about the 4 auto bid plan for the playoff, the 4-4-2-2, that playoff plan was getting written about a lot. I thought for sure that was going to happen. It didn't. So there's always time for an upset. There's always the possibility that it doesn't happen. But, I mean, it sure feels like it. It sure feels like it right now if it's going to get written up by everybody. So we shall see. It just, the other thing, and I know, Big Ten people hate me by this point, but whatever. It's just like the Big Ten is like driving the bus at the forefront of every decision that's just kind of greedy and bad for the sport, be it expanding the playoff to like 50 teams. I mean, every single time it's like playoff expansion, back to the Kevin Warren days, trying to be a conqueror of the map and everything he's pushing. It's just like the Big Ten. They take less heat than the SEC because the SEC is so much more vocal. Its fan base is so much more vocal, and Sankia is just a more easily hateable guy, and he's out there in the media more. The Big Ten is more sinister behind the scenes, man. I tell you what. Although, I mean, they're all at it right now. Paul Feinbaum, who, by the way, apparently is going to run for, he's going to try to go to Congress. I forget if it was the House or the Senate. I think it's senator. I don't know. Either way, Paul Feinbaum's thinking about getting into politics, but not before firing off a take that, Florida State's win over Alabama doesn't mean anything anymore because Alabama's now a different team than they were in week 1. And now Florida State's resume is worse because, they lost at Virginia, as opposed to Alabama losing to Florida State. It's like, dude, this guy. I said, get him into politics and out of our sports lives, but then, he might be able to do more damage in politics. Who knows? Who knows these days with the way college sports is now being intersected all over the place in politics. So fair pushback. Those who push back on me with that, we shall see. Anyway, just try and enjoy your football while you can, my friends.